I'm going to go for the challenge to have it all, to have the body, to have a business that fulfills me, to have the relationships that really fuel me, that make me feel understood and appreciated and valued. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to seek this out in all of my areas, romantically, in my business relationships, in my relationships with my kids, and having that standard of what success is for you, rather than success is just money achievement.
Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. Warriors at Work is a place where everyone in the workplace can come together, gain insight, encouragement, tell stories, connect, and share wisdom. We are a place of like-minded people at different stages of life, all coming together with a shared interest of enlightening and inspiring one another. If you're interested in going from the predictable to the potent, and you want to find your warrior magic, step into the journey with us. Welcome to Warriors at Work. Hi everybody, it's Jeannie. Thank you so much for being here with me at the Warriors at Work podcast. So today I bring to you Kimberly Spencer. Kimberly is an award-winning high-performance coach and trainer. She's a best-selling author. She's a screenwriter. She's a Pilates instructor. She's a mompreneur. She's a wife. And she joined me in this conversation from Australia, live. She's already in the tomorrow that we're working towards. And what we were able to do in this conversation is have a fascinating dialogue about how to leverage your mind and body. What's that connection? And she talked a lot about the modality of neuro linguistic programming, how she uses it with her clients, how she has adopted a lot of those modalities to break through some of her own barriers and her own self-limiting beliefs, which limiting beliefs is one of the toughest things that I personally struggle with, and I think a lot of the people in our community struggle with. And we were able to really break it down in a very tangible and relatable way. I think you're going to get a lot out of Kimberly, her perspective, and her energy, and her view on life is just so contagious. And I particularly was struck by the world she's looking to create. Enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the Warriors at Work podcast. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host on this wild journey. And I am thrilled to have this magnificent woman with me here today. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me from Australia right now. It's 7 a.m. tomorrow in her world. So thank you so much for being here, Kimberly.
Jeannie, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here with you. I have been excited to speak with you since our pre-conversation that we had, and I just adore what you're doing in the world, and I think that you are just bringing so much zest.
Thank you.
Much needed zest to the work world.
Thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. So let's talk about you, because there's so many cool things about how you are described. So I'm going to read a couple of things. So you're a screenwriter. You're a health advocate, you're a Pilates instructor, you're a best-selling author, you're a trainer, you're a high-performance coach, you're a mompreneur, you're a wife, you're doing all this while you relocated to Australia and now expecting your second child. FYI, I'm just saying this to everybody listening and watching. This woman has a very full life. And when I read about you and your accomplishments, here's one thing that really struck me is you describe yourself as someone who helps visionary leaders build their empire with holistic fulfillment in their bodies, business, and relationships. Please say more about that.
Well, I think so often we get caught up in this mold of what we suppose success to be. And it sometimes comes with this perception that there's sacrifice, and there always will be a form of sacrifice, but it depends on the hard that you want to choose into. So you can choose into the hard of sacrificing your body and sacrificing your relationships. I just personally choose not to, and nor do my clients want to. And choosing, I'm going to go for the challenge to have it all, to have the body, to have a business that fulfills me, to have the relationships that really fuel me, that make me feel understood and appreciated and valued. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to seek this out in all of my areas, romantically, in my business relationships, in my relationships with my kids, and having that standard of what success is for you, rather than success is just money achievement. So really it's about following your internal compass, understanding how to tap into those internal resources, how to understand your subconscious mind, your subconscious strategies, so that you can find those avenues that allow you to make your own mold rather than fall into someone else's. Like, I haven't written a movie in probably 10, no, not yet. How long have I been married to my husband? 8 years, because I met my husband on the day not the day that it came out, but I met my husband at a networking event for entertainment, when it was announced that my movie was getting picked up by Netflix and by Lionsgate. And I had met him at a networking event to celebrate with another person from the film who was a part of the same group. And so that's how I met my husband. So I can calculate when was the last time I wrote a film. It was a while ago. Do I think film writing will circle back? Absolutely. I love filmmaking as a medium for transforming people's stories. I know a lot of people, when they get into the coaching space, they get very into like, oh, I only read personal development books and leadership books. And I think that that's great. I also think that really does, like, your subconscious mind works in metaphors and stories. And what better metaphor than one that's on screen that actually is putting you into a hypnotic trance? I mean, if you've ever had a 4-hour Netflix binge, that's technically a hypnotic trance, and we've all done it. So that also has a positive meaning, that also has a lesson attached to it. I mean, what moved me from screenwriting into coaching and into business was actually the fact that I found out that the film that I had co-written, which was a movie that I would never have thought would have transformed people's lives, did just that. And it was because some two boys saw that their lives were being mirrored on screen, and they chose not to go down that path that the main character was going down, because it showed a pretty rough road. But they chose a different way. And that was when I said, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I had thought it was in the form of screenwriting in Hollywood, because that was the only form I was exposed to as a young girl growing up in Los Angeles, where I saw a career that could make the impact and the income that I wanted to make. Whereas once I saw that what I really wanted to do was transform people's stories, it didn't matter the form in which I did it, whether it was on screen in a film or in a TV show or in a business or in my e-commerce business, where I had a back stretching device where I was transforming people's stories about what was possible for their bodies. Like, this common thread and this common theme, when you find that theme, it changes the game for the form, and it can show up in any form. Currently, it's showing up in the form of coaching. It may circle back. I have a feeling it will circle back into film writing eventually, but the timeline is not up to me.
That is amazing how you just pulled together all of those pieces. So how I heard it is that your screenwriting experience really surfaced for you the power of stories and the power of the subconscious mind. And I know we're going to get into this through the neuro linguistic programming, which is a key modality for this, but how you not only saw it, you really were paying attention to it and said, okay, all of these pieces are going to lead to the next thing. And I could do this to help other people transform. Well, first of all, bring their story to life, and then transform whatever narrative they think they're married to. You can actually modify a lot of those things. And the whole subconscious mind part of this conversation, I cannot wait to get into, because I'm absolutely fascinated. I've done a lot of certifications on the neuroscience behind leadership and why we make certain choices. But NLP is a fascinating thing, and I can't wait to hear how you pull this in to the whole coaching experience. So let's talk about it through the lens of shifting beliefs. I was just talking about this morning. I think this is where all of us struggle, is like this idea of limiting beliefs. We are somehow conditioned into what we think we're supposed to be doing, or I'm afraid of failure, or I'm afraid of success, or I'm not enough. And we get stuck into these patterns, and it keeps us either right where we are, or we go backwards or go down a very bad rabbit hole. So talk to us about how neuro linguistic programming, or NLP, comes to life for you as a modality in the work that you're doing.
Well, for me, having come from a writing background, like NLP is such a perfect modality for me because it's dealing with language. And so as a
Mm,
screenwriter, I was writing language all day long and listening to people's language and being able to dissect language. So neurolinguistic programming allows me that opportunity to listen to the words that someone is saying and really take them for their word, because that's what your subconscious mind is doing. It takes
mm,
everything literally. I mean, and I use the example with comedians. The amount of comedians who are depressed, who have committed suicide, who are on drugs, well, a lot of humor that they're putting out into the world is very self-deprecating. Your
mm,
subconscious mind is always listening. And so listening to the words that you are saying about yourself, about others in in your world, and how you process and think about life is so key to understanding what the frame of this that you have built for yourself, what is the frame that you're living in inside of the picture that you want, and is that the picture that you even want? Is that the frame? Is that the size that you even want? And so being able to listen to the power of language and how it's playing into it. Like, I was just teaching at a college the past week about our perceptions of time. Like, you can learn a lot
mm.
about how someone frames their life through how they speak about their relationship with time, because everything is a relationship. And so if you're listening to somebody and they're talking about they're constantly talking about their past, they're constantly referring back to their past, and you kind of know that they're living in this story of like yesteryear and not really being present. They may not be very future focused on their goals. And so how do you move them into actually what it is that they want? Because they're living in yesteryear, where yesteryear was better than the present. And it's the good old days versus like now, really? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
is that anybody's desired life, that they think that, oh, that, well, that happened in the past, so those are the good old days, and so now it's just downhill. Like, that's
Yeah.
personally not a life that or a story that I want to buy into. So how do we flip
Mm,
that? Well, I can learn. I first have to know where they are, and by listening to their language around time, I'm able to hear, okay, they're really living in those concepts of like the good old days were behind them, and the future they're not really speaking a lot about the future. They may speak offhandedly about what they want, but they're not really living into it. They're not putting their mind, their vision, the ideas into the future as far as what they want to create their future to be. And so they're really stuck living in the past. So that's just one concept. There are multiple linguistic concepts. You can hear how someone thinks in like large chunks or how someone thinks in small chunks. And
mm.
that allows NLP really allows for you to influence through communication people's thinking so that you can gain greater agreement, so that then you can help move them forward. And the tools are super powerful to be able to navigate what's going on in their subconscious mind, to see, okay, how are they thinking? Why are they thinking that? And what's those subconscious drivers? Like, one of the big drivers as to why people self-sabotage is because they're using there are two types of motivation. You have fear and you have faith. And a lot of people,
Mm.
especially successful people too, use fear as a motivation. I don't want to be like this person growing up. I don't want to experience this. I don't want ever to put my kids through this. And so they're able to move forward, but it's like driving a car while looking in the rearview mirror. So how do we then flip the vision? How do we then flip into focusing on that longer term strategy so that you're driving forward, looking straight through the window at where you want to go, instead of at the rearview mirror at everything you don't want or everything you fear happening?
Mm. So if I'm translating what you're telling me correctly, so initial interaction is you're listening to words and phrases and you can gauge where they are in their journey. So you're using the NLP model to be able to do that. And then how do you get to move them through these modalities towards like the vision or the journey they want to be on and moving past the limiting beliefs?
So questions are super powerful. That's why I love coaching. Is it's a do with process, and it's not I'm going to give you a solution. It's questioning and shaking the frame. Because if you can shake that frame enough with enough questions to induce possibility of something else, then that allows my clients, that allows the subject, for lack of a better word, to be able to create their own reality, to create their own vision, to say, oh, okay, you're right, that belief actually isn't
Mm.
something that I want to hold on to. I mean, if I were to look at the beliefs that I had back when I was younger, I mean, back when I was struggling with bulimia and body image issues and dealing with healing my relationship with my dad because I grew up with an addict, like I thought I was broken. I thought I
Mm.
was damaged. I thought I was damaged goods, and I thought I was a victim. And eventually, I had to really shake the frame on those beliefs to see were those getting me the results that I wanted. And while they got me certain successes in career, they weren't getting me successes feeling successful personally, and they weren't getting me feeling successful in my romantic relationships. And so I had to examine those beliefs of, is it ultimately true that I was broken? No, not necessarily. And so once I allowed for those me to shake the frame on those beliefs to see what else could I believe? What else could, if that belief is no longer serving me, or if that belief served me up into a point, because every belief that we have serves us up to
Mm.
a point. Like every belief, I call them the Trojan horses. And I write about this in my book that's coming out, Rule My Body, that we have these Trojan horses for every single belief where they keep us safe, they keep us getting acknowledgement in some way, and they keep us connected. So we're always looking for those, and that's for positive beliefs and negative beliefs. So the ones that move us forward, the ones that don't, every belief we have is keeping us safe, connected, and in some way getting us acknowledgement. So take, for example, the belief of I am fat, right? So maybe like with one of my clients who I was working with, she had gained a whopping 70 pounds just in the span of a few like 6 months. It was 6 to 8, it was like 6 to 8 months. It was a very short time. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting pattern to examine. And we were looking at what she was doing and the patterns of how she was talking about her body, how she was talking about her experiences with work, and how she was talking about her relationships, to really paint this holistic picture of like what was going on that suddenly caused this drastic spike and change in her personal surrounding, in her personal like body environment. And when we started diving deeper into it, we found that the weight was an extra layer that was just protecting her. It was just keeping her safe. She'd been in some bad
Mm.
emotionally abusive relationships, and that extra layer of weight was allowing her to feel like a sense of protection that she wouldn't get hurt again in another relationship. And so we were able to shake the frame on that belief of the safety. Another thing of that perception of that belief of I am fat is sometimes then that can keep you, even if you're not technically overweight or obese, that belief of living in that belief sometimes can get you acknowledgement, right?
Mm.
So often, especially as women, we deflect compliments. And so we'll take a compliment and then like throw some crappy limiting belief onto it, like, oh yeah, but I feel so fat today. Or like, well, oh, you look gorgeous in that, yeah, but I'm feeling a little fat. So we can take that belief and throw that extra stuff onto it. And so in some way that gets us acknowledgement because it gets the other person to say, "Oh my gosh, no, you don't look like that at
So true.
all. You don't you're gorgeous. You don't look like that." So so in our mind it somehow enhances that accomplishment. So it gets us that acknowledgement. The other part is that it can get us connected. So every belief we have connects us in some way. And so if we're getting that connection, maybe we felt connected to our family because we weren't that person with those weird healthy habits, or who had those weird dietary restrictions or things that we wanted to, just focus on a little bit, eating a little bit more healthily. And so we're able to sit down and eat all those buttery potatoes and things with our family, and that allows us to feel connected. And then it allows us to maybe continue to buy into that belief of being fat. But that may not necessarily be true, because people who are, anorexic have that belief as well. So so that belief is in turn a belief as well. Sometimes it can be an actual physical result, but it is also a belief. And so looking at the
My
belief
brain is getting flooded with so many things right now, because I'm thinking like, I am stupid or I'm
Mhm.
smart. All of the labels that then get attached to that. And it keeps us in that sort of predictable world that we have been conditioned to believe and operate. And we have trained everyone around us to also treat us in that way, because that's the belief we've put out. And then when we start to shift those beliefs, and I can say this personally, just in the journey over the next year, and I'm going to be very interested to hear what your perspective on this is, that when you start to shake the frame, like you were saying, shake the frame, and you start to shift that, you could get some people that are like, whoa, that's different. That's not what we've agreed is the belief about you. Then you have to kind of step back to say, well, this is who I am. This is what I'm becoming. That no longer serves. That served me up to this point. This is the world I'm really trying to create. Are you with me or not? And sometimes it's a no. But my brain was like, oh, I'm stupid. I'm too smart. I'm too loud. I'm
Mhm.
bossy. Like all of those things
Yeah,
that I
those are
have.
all deep identity beliefs.
Yes. And how we will dumb ourselves down to try to, for the sake of harmony or sake of connection. And a lot of
Mhm.
times we don't have the awareness that we're even doing it. And I think the NLP piece is so powerful, because it also, you're listening without any judgment. You're just holding the space and surfacing. Here are the words. How does that make you feel? Is that true? Not true? How does that tie to how you're showing up in the world, and where are the places you want to make changes? I think it's a beautiful example, by the way, and thank you very much for sharing your own personal
Of course.
reflection there, because I think it just adds so much more power to what you're sharing. I'm curious now, if you zoom out over the crazy year we're having, or continue to have, talk to us about what kind of things are you seeing with the work that you do, working with entrepreneurs or working in companies. I'd love to hear your perspective. And being that we're talking about this notion about leveraging your mind, your body, and your spirit in a way to move you in the direction that's most important, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing both the necessity of innovation and the absolute terror of it.
Mm,
And so people are either being forced in a way, like being and I don't like to use the word forced, but like dragged kicking and screaming into innovating, or they
yeah.
are allowing for that innovation. They're adopting that mindset of growth mindedness, of having to innovate everything, whether it's the type of business that you have, or innovating your skill set into a different industry, or innovating your lifestyle for how you want to lead it. Like, for us, we just leaned into innovation and decided to live in a different country.
You're like, why not? I'm gonna move
Like,
around the world.
we just figured we'd just innovate in that way. So it really allows for that innovation piece. Sometimes we're so scared of change because we're so holding on to like the past, and like, and I hear it in the language of society of like, when things get back to normal, what if this is how it is? Like, how do you lean into creating certainty in a world where innovation is just constant and never ending? And so really what I've seen from the companies and the clients that have thrived are the ones who leaned in fast to innovating. And the ones who I see who are struggling, or for the people, because entrepreneurship, especially this past year, has boomed. And I follow the futurist Peter Diamandis, who wrote that there will be more income generated by entrepreneurs in the next decade than there has been in the history of humankind.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm like for me, I'm cheering. That just is so exciting. At the same time, why is it, especially as women, that only 2% of women hit the $1 million mark?
Mm.
Why is it that most female-run businesses are still struggling to even hit six figures? And what I see is that there is a language of doubt, and that there is a
Mm.
language of fear, and that there is also an environment where people may be looking to the wrong types of people for advice and for growth. If somebody, like one of my clients, I had a discussion with her around, she was looking to launch her company, and she was just like in this cycle of just struggle with
Mm.
launching it. And I found out that she was continuously speaking with her mother. Well, that's fine. Like, it's cool to talk to your mom every day. That's great. But her mom had been a 50-year employee for her whole life.
Mm.
And so she'd never actually gone off. She'd never started a business. So every idea that my client would have, she'd say, "Oh, isn't that risky? Or maybe you should get that evaluated." Or, but in my company, we would do this. And I'm like, well, her company also had 300 employees. So it runs a little different than having to be scrappy with the startup. So there's a different mindset around it. So look at who you are surrounding yourself with. Are you
Mm.
surrounding yourself with people in an environment that is looking to grow you? And like you said, who who see that new version that you're looking to become, because I say that both parenthood and entrepreneurship are like personal development on steroids. Like,
We're getting black belts in personal
we're
development.
seriously, because we are gonna, like, it is a daily, if not hourly, like, mastery and mirroring of, okay, here's this pattern that I'm seeing emerge in, or I'm seeing I'm not as strong enough as a leader or as a manager of my team, or, oh, I'm seeing this pattern, or I'm seeing that I'm not leading my kid in this way. So those two are such powerful reflections. And I think people dream of entrepreneurship as being this like thing that will give them the freedom and ease that they want, when that is not necessarily true. It can,
Mm.
but it may not be true for that person, because that person maybe feel more freedom and ease if they're doing something that doesn't require them to wear all the hats. Because as soon as you become an entrepreneur, you are starting out wearing all the hats, and then you eventually delegate and grow your team and grow your company to where you're not, in the finance department, in the operations, or in the sales and marketing. But initially, you're starting out and you're doing all the jobs. Whereas some people find more freedom and ease when they're actually in a role that allows them to operate inside of their genius zone. It just and that gives them enough autonomy so that they're doing it where they're not in a controlling environment that's trying to restrict their creativity. So they still get those creative juices. They still get to authentically express themselves. They still get to show up in their highest and best self. It's just not, they're not having to wear all the hats. They're not having to do all the things.
Mm. I think what you're hitting on is interesting too, is I think people think the everything in absolutes, everything in black and white, it's this or that. And whether you're in corporate America or you're working a small business or you're an entrepreneur, what we've learned more than anything in the last year is how many dimensions there are to this experience. So which goes back to your original point around innovation. If you're embracing that idea, innovation is a wild ride with a lot of unpredictability and a ton of abstract ways of being. There's very little rules for how all of this goes. And even the most seasoned leaders that I've worked with, there's no rule book. It's a ton of trust and faith in who they are, their own coping mechanisms, and their willingness to play with the edges. And when I think of people moving into entrepreneurship, they'll often say, I want the flexibility to drive my own schedule. To be all that stuff is true,
Mhm.
but it comes with a ton of gray
Yeah.
and just not knowing what is what. So it's really important to make a lot of those distinctions as you're looking to grow and evolve and expand and move into the place that's most meaningful to you. And I think that's just really, really important. So I'm sort of like mentally underlining what you just said, because I think it's so powerful for anybody watching or listening to think about that in a positive way. And you also use the zone of genius. Do you read
Gay Henrik?
Gate? Yes, The
Yes.
Big Leap. I
Yes.
just made mention of that this morning. His ultimate success mantra
Mm-hmm.
around abundance and love and being in that mindset of success. I love the fact that you said that. It's like one of my favorite all-time books ever.
The zone of genius, I have seen a direct correlation between the amount of time an entrepreneur is spending in their zone of genius and the amount of income that they're making. So typically, if I see a 5-figure or low 6-figure entrepreneur, they're still wearing way too many hats that aren't in their zone of genius. And they just need to kind of flip that script just a little bit.
Oh my God. Are you talking my language? I
Yeah.
have given that book and that phrase, that the whole methodology that he uses in that book to so many people is a lot of what you were talking about earlier too. When people are coming to you and you're using the NLP model to kind of determine where they are, you can see if they're in their competence, their high competence, or they're playing with the edges or they're hitting the ceiling. I just love that.
Yeah, if you love that book, you would also love the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. It is my top recommended book because
Really?
they break down leadership so simply. It was recommended by one of my mentors who scaled her company from 0 to 30 million in 3 years. And I was like, whatever books you read, whatever things you did,
Rub my head, do
let me
something.
know.
Oh God. Well, that's an interesting point, actually. Because I am curious, because you made mention of a couple of authors and people that you follow, but who are the people that you're really tracking, particularly over the last year, that you're like, that you like their formula, you like their approach, you like what they're talking about?
Peter Diamandis is one for future technology, for possible predictions of what's to come, for trends. One of my mentors is Lynn Casey of Shine Scout. She also is a futurist as well. And so I use her for trends and seeing how people are buying, what they're buying into, and like what are we seeing are common themes that are coming up in the world. And so those are two futurists. The books that I follow, I mean, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is my Bible. And and I loved Dr. David Hawkins as well, around his books around letting go and power versus force, and those ones that really deal with the nitty-gritty of the emotions, because EQ and emotions is not something that we're really taught in school. And I know for me, I did not grow up in a household that knew how to process or feel emotions. I grew up in a household with addiction, and with addiction comes a lot of escapism and a lot of trying to repress and suppress emotions, but not actually how do you process these things that we live with as humans on a daily basis. And I now see emotions as being such beautiful signals as to the things that we value. And that's been something, a reframe on feelings that has taken me years to get to.
I love that. Well, when you think about the workplace right now, so just like put your workplace hat on, what do you think the workplace needs more of right now?
Communication, but it's in a depth of it. Like, we have breadth of communication, we have a lot of surface communication,
Mm.
but on really seeking to understand rather than to be understood. And so often we are listening with the idea and the desire to prove a point rather than, and to be right, rather than to actually allow for ourselves to understand where the other person is coming from and how can we influence their belief systems around why they're making the decisions that they're making, especially if we disagree with them. Like, influence is such a powerful skill set when used appropriately. Like, it's a huge skill set, and not in a manipulative way, but first we must seek to understand rather than to be understood. And I think that's just
Mm.
it's not just a workplace problem. It's a people problem that we're seeing.
Yeah. I'll
I think
often
that,
say we listen with our solution running.
yeah,
We listen for just enough information and then we're formulating a response. And particularly this environment right now, right? So everybody's going video call to video call to video. It's very transaction oriented. It's everybody's doing their work at 7 o'clock at night because they're in meetings all day long, that's like a whole nother podcast.
it's a whole other thing.
The imbalance that's happening. But I wholeheartedly agree. A different kind of listening, like listening and communicating with more of your senses, which is really what I'm trying to do, is create a movement where we can do this without feeling embarrassment or shame for saying words like intuition and soul. And how is that showing up in your body? Because we both know that when you're having a great day, it's not just your professional attributes, it's all the other stuff. It's all the things that you're talking about. We are not one dimensional. We're not just this thing that's supposed to drive to create income to have a happy house. It's like we have so many other things happening in our humanness that I just so agree with so many things that you're talking about here.
Yeah,
I
as one of my mentors calls it, we're not stepford-preneures.
Oh my God, I love that.
It's
What a visual
oh my gosh,
immediately.
just like this, like, "Oh, I'm just going to drive to work, and here are my success markers, and this is everything that I hit, and I feel nothing." It's like this stepfordpreneur this expectation to be robotic. It's not. Like, we have feelings, especially, as a parent, and with the state of business the way that it is, we're all working from home for the most part, and dealing
Mm,
with kids that it's not kids are not something to be dealt with. There's something that we chose to have.
mm,
And being in that environment with our children, with our partners, with our work, and having them be this dance rather than and have that fluidity rather than have it be this, like, I drove to work and I achieved X, Y, and Z, and then that's that's an outdated model, I truly believe. And I think that we're now in the process of innovating that model to allow for more intuition and flow and feeling, quite frankly.
mm. That's the beauty of what COVID has taught us, is that there is a full-on integration
Hmm.
between our personal self and our professional self, whether we wanted it or not. It's happened and it's happening. And so the humanness is becoming more and more a factor. So I think it's a wonderful, ugly thing, if you will. There's just so many dimensions to that as well. I would love to shift and talk more about you as we round out our conversation. Um, one of the things that I like to talk about is, again, we're all experiencing all sorts of things in our life, not just professional success, but we're all looking to grow and evolve personally. So share a little bit about what you're working on in your own warrior journey.
Well, currently I'm working on getting a baby out in about 3 to 8 weeks, and developing the I'm simplifying and systematizing are my two words for this year.
Mm,
Last year it was trust. But this year it is systematizing and simplifying everything, because, as Albert Einstein says, it takes a genius to make things simple. And so we're looking at a lot of processes. We're in the nitty gritty of looking at some processes that have served and some processes that may have been a little too complicated, or that weren't really working. And so that's also my vision and my goal for personally as well, is systematizing and simplifying
mm,
on what are those few things, the Pareto principle, the 20% that produces the 80% of the results,
mm,
and then
mm.
allowing for that ease of not having to do that other 80%, um, or being able to delegate that or automate it or question if that's even really necessary,
Mm.
to give myself more space, so that I have more space to play with my kid, more space to hang out with my husband, more space to enjoy being in Australia. Like, so that's my next vision of really examining every area of not only my personal life but also my business, as far as what do we need to simplify and systematize.
And what are you working towards? So like when you look down the road, what is Kimberly working towards?
That's such a great question, and there's a lot. of things in the works, in the vision. I am more of an internal vision holder. So I tend to not speak things out
Mm.
before until they happen. But for me, what I see is my big mission is to impact 1 million children. And I've been asked this by many people if they're like, wait, don't you work with adults? I'm like, yes, I got to work with parents first.
Yeah.
Well, 'cause you're going to be more of an influence to your kids than I will.
That's true.
And so I that is one of my grand visions, is to be able to impact that many children, but that means at least double the amount of parents, if not triple, just because that really being able to, I believe that your life is an example for what is possible. And for me, and for what the example that I want to show for my kids, for especially because I'm going to be having both boys, I want to show them what's possible for a woman in the workplace. I want to show them what is possible um, for a strong woman, was possible for a relationship, for a marriage, and being that role model and really adopting that role model mindset and leading from that space, because people are watching, whether you have one follower or 1 million,
Mm.
and your kids are listening probably the hardest, and they're not listening to what you say you're going to do or how many times you say you're going to be there and you don't show up for it. They listen to what you do. And looking at how, constantly questioning, how can I be in more congruence with what I am preaching and with what I teach, and constantly checking my own congruence level is huge. And so what I would love for this world is is a world of ownership, where people are taking personal responsibility for their actions, where they are seeking to understand and accepting other points of view and diversity of thought, where they are adopting a growth mindset of continual innovation and continual collaboration and a can-do attitude, and where they're fully able to express their beautiful authenticity, however that is.
Thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Warriors at Work and letting us be a part of your warrior journey. You can ask questions and make suggestions for future topics at jc@jeanniecoomber.com. Connect with me personally on LinkedIn and Instagram, and join us on the Warrior Conversations channel on YouTube and at the Warrior Magic Community page on Facebook. You can find links to all these places on my website, jeanniecoomber.com, and most importantly, be sure to tell friends about us, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It helps others find the show and puts more warrior magic out into the world.